Masechet Yevamot, Daf Ayin Gimel. We start with what looks like a pretty simple question, but it's going to take us all day today and into the next daf to answer it. Ba'omineh merav sheshat. Arel mahu b'ma'aser. The question is regarding ma'aser sheni. That's every farmer has to take the tenth of his produce on the first and second and fourth and fifth year. Take that to Jerusalem and he eats it there. Everyone eats it, right? Kohen, Levi, Israel. He invites the Leviim, he invites the poor people to come and join him, and he can enjoy all this Maaser Sheni has to be eaten in Jerusalem. Good. So now the question is, can an uncircumcised person join in? Torah doesn't say anything about this. So we're not sure. We want to compare it to other equivalent cases to answer this question. So here are the two sides. We know that there's already a connection between Pesach and Maaser Sheni, in that we learn Pesach from Maaser Sheni regarding an onen. So here's the Pesukim regarding Maaser Sheni. This is the vidui that he says. It's right after the vidui bikurim, the famous one that we say on Passover in the Pesach Seder, Arami Oved Avi. Right after that we have the vidui for Maaser Sheni. By the way, keep in mind, it's going to come up in a second, that there's vidui for both of these things, bikurim and Maaser Sheni. So here it is. In these years, when you take this Maaser, and you say the following, Bi'arti hakodesh min habayit. We're going to learn from every one of these phrases. So I got rid of all of the maaser from the house. We're going to learn this. This is a law of bi'ur, that you do in fact have to use it all up before the fourth and seventh year of the Shemitah. And I shared it and so on. Lo achalti be'oni. This is the key phrase that we need. Maaser sheni cannot be eaten during aninut, when one is in mourning before the burial. So this is how we know it. Also says lo be'ati menu betameh. That's going to be important, that you cannot destroy it, and when it's tumah, you can't benefit from it while destroying it. In other words, burn it for fire and use the fire. Okay, so now we know that maaser sheni cannot be an onen cannot eat it, and we compared it to Pesach, and therefore onen also cannot partake in Korban Pesach. That we know. Now the question is, can we flip it around and learn the other? Learn one thing from the other. Learn from Pesach. We know that regarding Korban Pesach, uncircumcised person is out. Pasuk says that explicitly. We saw those Pasukim. So can we learn the other way around? Maaser is also the same. Good. Now this would work if it's a Gezerah Shavah that we're learning one from the other. Then the Gezerah Shavah opens a channel and it works both ways. That's one side of it, and from there we will learn that Maaser Sheni cannot be eaten by an Arel. Or maybe what we're learning here is not a Gezerah Shavah, but a Kal Vachomer. And if it's a Kal Vachomer, so Korban Pesach is more Chamur than Maaser Sheni. So we can learn Korban Pesach from Maaser Sheni, right? If this Maaser Sheni, which is Kal, and has this law that Nonen cannot eat it, all the more so Pesach. But the other way around, you cannot learn just because Maaser Sheni, just because Pesach cannot, and Arel cannot eat it, maybe that's because it's Chamur. It doesn't mean that Maaser Sheni, which is Kal, that also an uncircumcised person cannot eat it. So then it would be permitted. So this is the two sides of the argument, and that they presented to Rav Sheshat. And Rav Sheshat is going to give an answer. And the answer is from a Mishnah. It's right there, it's a Mishnah. This is a mistake in here. It's not halal, but rather bikurim. And I'm going to show you the context of the Mishnah, because this is important. There is no Talmud Bavli for Seder Zeraim. And so this daf is going to be a lot of Zeraim, but we're fulfilling our mitzvah of learning Zeraim here through these dapim. So the Mishnah in Bikurim talks about Teruma, Bikurim, and Maaser. These three, trifecta. And it's comparing each of them. They all have some things in common that the other one doesn't, right? Which one of these things is not like the other? Well, they each have commonalities and differences. So the first Mishnah talks about what Teruma and Bikurim have in common, but not Maaser. The second Mishnah compares Maaser and Bikurim, what they have in common, what's not true for Terumah. And the third Mishnah is what Terumah and Maaser have in common, which are not true for Bikurim. Okay, so you see that it's probably worth going and pausing and going and looking at that Mishnah Bikurim Perek Bet inside, and that will definitely clarify this. Okay, so here we go. Terumah v'bikurim. Just to predict the answer, Rav Sheshet is going to end up saying no, that an uncircumcised person can not eat maaser sheni, because after all, it's not included in the following list. Okay, so what we're looking for is what's not here. Okay, good. So let's see. Terumah v'bikurim chayvim alehen mita v'chomesh v'asurin lezarim. Terumah and bikurim can only be eaten by the kohen. Terumah, right? 1-2% of some of the produce, you give it to the kohen. Bikurim also, the first fruit, you put it in the basket, you give it to the kohen. Only the kohen can eat it, and not a zar, not a non-kohen. And if a non-kohen does eat it, he has to pay an extra fifth as a penalty. All this is not true for maaser sheni, where everyone can eat maaser sheni. Kohen, these two things, Terumah and Bikurim, belong to the Kohen. Like if he wants to do Kiddushin with it, it's his property. Not so Maaser Sheni is not the property of the owner. Ve'olin be'achad u'me'ah. If Maaser or Bikurim get mixed up in regular food, it has to be less than 1 in 100, and then it's batel. So that's a lot. It's very strong. Whereas Maaser Sheni, even if it just gets mixed in 1 in 2 for solids, like regular non-kosher and kosher, then you can eat it. So that's another way that those two are unlike Maaser. Sheni utunin rechisat yadayim v'arev shemesh. In order to eat terumah and bikurim, one has to wash his hands, because hands are considered sheni l'tuman. They make terumah tameh. And you also, if someone was at Tivul Yom, he was tameh, he went to the mikveh during the day, he has to wait till it gets dark in order to eat terumah and bikurim. Not so for maaser sheni. That's no problem. A Tivul Yom can eat it. All these are true for terumah bikurim, and they are not true for maaser sheni. Good, that's the list. Now let's analyze. V'im ita, if it were true that maaser sheni could be eaten by an arel, nitni arel asur bahen, mashen ken b'maaser, then you should have included in the list and said an arel cannot eat terumah and bikurim, but can eat maaser sheni. Since it's not in this list, that shows that they all three of these types of food have in common. Arel cannot eat them. That's Rav Sheshet's brilliant proof. All right, good. Seems like a solid proof, except that, how do you know this list is comprehensive? Maybe Tana v'shier. Maybe this list gave a whole bunch of examples, but there are others that did not include. So we challenge that. Umay shier, the hay shier. There's a general rule. If you're going to leave out an example, then you have to leave out at least 2 examples. It doesn't make sense to make a whole list, A, B, C, D, etc., if the etc. is only one item. Just write that one more item. It only makes sense to use an abbreviation if you want to leave out 2 or more items. So in order to prove that this list is not comprehensive, we have to show that it leaves out at least 2 items. Okay, so is there another item that's left out of this list? We say no, not in this Mishnah, but the next Mishnah, which are all connected, does leave out 2 things. And that shows that this series of Mishnayot in general is not comprehensive. And therefore this first Mishnah is not comprehensive. So sorry, Rav Sheshet, there's no proof. All right, so what is let's spell out what is left out from the next Mishnah. Here it is. Shier deka taneh sefa. We leave out in the what's called the sefa, and what we call Mishnah Bet. Yesh b'maaser ubebikurim ma'ashe'en ken v'terumah. There are common denominators between maaser sheni and bikurim that are not true regarding terumah. What are they? So maaser ubikurim teonin haba'at makom. Maaser sheni and bikurim have to be brought to Jerusalem. Terumah doesn't have to. Terumah, you go to your local kohen and give it to him there. These brought to Jerusalem. Teonin vidui, and you have to say the statement. Both of them are mentioned in Devarim chapter 26. Vasur leonen, and both bikurim, maaser and bikurim. A mourner cannot have it. But teruma, an onen, is allowed to eat teruma. We proved that a couple of times earlier. That's all Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon matir. Rabbi Shimon permits the last one. He thinks that an onen is permitted regarding, well, not Maaseh Sheni. It says explicitly there, Lo achalti be'oni. But regarding Bikurim, Rabbi Shimon says, Bikurim, it's okay for an onen to eat. Now back to Tanakama says, V'chayavin bebi'ur, both Maaser and Bikurim, you have to get rid of any leftovers. You can keep, you can roll over from year 1 to 2 to 3, but in the 4th year, you got to get rid of it. And then again, you can roll over after that, but in the 7th year, you have to eat or destroy any Maaser, Sheni, and Bikurim. And that's not true for teruma. However, Rabbi Shimon poter, once again, regarding bikurim only, Rabbi Shimon disagrees and says, no, you don't have to get rid of the bikurim, but everyone agrees that it does not apply, biur does not apply to teruma. Okay, so that's the list. Ve'il, now the Gemara is commenting on it and says, Ve'ilu asur leva'er mehen betum'ah, ואוכלן בטומאת עצמן לוקה, מה שאין כן בתרומה לוקתני, על מה תנה ושייר. But there are the two more things that could be listed on this list that are true and that it leaves out. One of them is that to destroy it bitum'ah. If regarding teruma, if it becomes tameh, you can take that tameh teruma oil and burn it and use it for light. You're allowed to benefit from it. But regarding Maaser and Bikurim, that's not true. You cannot do that. And also, eating it bitumat atzman. If the item itself, there's two types of eating bitumah. One is the person eating it is tameh, and the other that the food itself is tameh. So the food, the person cannot eat it bitumah. Not only that, also if the food itself is tameh, one gets malkut. That's true for Maaser Sheni and Bikurim, but it's not true for Teruma. And now, though both of these differences are true, and yet they're not mentioned in the Mishnah. That proves this Mishnah is not comprehensive. Therefore, Mishnah Aleph is also not necessarily comprehensive. And sorry, Rav Sheshat, you don't have a proof that Maaser Sheni cannot be eaten by an Arel. Maybe this is another difference between Maaser Sheni and the others. It just happens not to be listed. Okay, so far we asked the question that Rav Sheshat, he proposed an answer and we rejected it. But now that we've cited this Mishnah, we want to explain some of the details of it, especially the machalokot that we saw in this last Mishnah. We said Basurin leonen, that regarding bikurim and maaser sheni prohibited to an onen. Rabbi Shimon matir, he says bikurim and onen can eat. What's his source? Minalehu tichtiv lo tuchal lechol bisharecha maasar deganecha vetiroshecha v'yisarecha utrumat yadecha. Pasuk in Devarim Yud Bet, which is talking about centralization, and now there's going to be one place that is holy. So it says you cannot, once you get into Israel and you have that place, you cannot eat in any of your gates wherever you want. Maaser, that's Maaser Deganecha, that's Maaser Sheni, and also Terumat Yadecha, the giving of your hand. What is this referring to? V'amamor Terumat Yadecha elu bikurim. This is talking about bikurim, not talking about teruma. Right, teruma you can eat anywhere. Terumat yadecha bikurim. Also, you can't eat it, have it in your gates. You have to bring it to hamakom asher chad, which now we know afterwards is Yerushalayim. Ve'itkash bikurim lemaaser. So you see in this pasuk, this is all Rabbi Shimon's reading. It puts in one pasuk back to back maaser sheni and bikurim. So therefore we compare them. Maaser asur leonen, af bikurim asur leonen. So just like maaser sheni, an onen cannot eat it. That's what it says in the pasuk regarding maaser sheni explicitly. So to bikurim. Okay, all that is Tanakama, not Rabbi Shimon. This is Tanakama who says that's prohibited in maaser sheni and also bikurim. We learn it from this pasuk. Okay, and how about Rabbi Shimon? Where are you going to learn that maaser? How come you think that bikurim is permitted for an onen to eat? Rabbi Shimon, teruma karena rachamana. It doesn't say bikurim explicitly. It could have just said bikurim. Instead, it calls bikurim terumat yadecha. Everyone agrees that terumat yadecha refers to bikurim. From the fact that the Torah uses the word the giving of your hand and uses the word teruma to describe bikurim, means that we should compare it to teruma. Ma teruma muteret leonen, af bikurim mutar leonen. And that, so therefore, just like teruma and onen can eat, so to bikurim and onen can eat. So the question is, are we going to focus on this word itself, teruma, or that's what Rabbi Shimon does, or the context where the beginning of the pasuk is compared to maaser sheni and compared to that? That's what Chachamim say. All right, we explained that part of it. Now, v'chayavin bebiur, you have to destroy before the 4th and 7th year. That applies to maaser sheni. That it says explicitly in the pasuk regarding, right, it'll be aditi. Bi'adati, and then says lo bi'adati, and that's for good for maaser sheni. However, what about bikurim? Rabbi Shimon Poter, he says no, it doesn't apply to bikurim. Why? So mor makish, mor lo makish, the same reasoning that we had before. Tanakama compares them in this pasuk in Devarim, and so therefore, since maaser sheni you have to get rid of in the 4th and 7th year, so too bikurim, that's compared. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, no, I'm not comparing them. These are not compared. Teruma is Tumat Yadechas Bikurim. That's being compared to Teruma and not to Maaser Sheni. So it follows the same reasoning. V'asula ben mehen betum'ah ve'ochlan betumat atzman lokeh. Now the Mishnah went on. So all this is a tangent because Rav Sheshet brought in this Mishnah, and then from that Mishnah we said, is it comprehensive? No, because look at Mishnah Bet. That one's not comprehensive. Oh, so once we brought that Mishnah, now we're analyzing the rest of that Mishnah. And over there it says, you cannot, when you destroy it, and because it's tameh, you cannot benefit from that fire. And if you eat when it's tameh, when the food itself is tameh, you get malkut. These two things apply only to maaser sheni and bikurim, but not to teruma. Okay, teruma, you can benefit from it when you're lighting it, when you're burning it, and if you eat it while it's prohibited, it's not malkut. Minelan, how do we know this? Tanya, here's a braita. Rabbi Shimon Omer, lo bi'arti menu betameh, ben shani tameh vehu tahor, ben shani tahor vehu tameh. So Rabbi Shimon says simply, since it says regarding maaser sheni that I did not destroy it while tameh. So it sounds like any tameh. It doesn't matter whether I am tameh or the food itself is tameh. So therefore, either way, that's how we know. Okay, vehecha muzhad al achilato and liyadea. But Rabbi Shimon continues and says, regarding a warning about eating, that I don't have a source for. You see, this is vidui, so it's more like the storytelling. Listen, this is what I did, this is what I didn't do. But can you punish someone based on what the Torah says about his admission? Don't we need also a warning specifically about eating? Right, this was about biur, which focuses on destroying, not necessarily the regular eating. So he says, I don't know, I don't have a warning about this. Tum'at haguf behedja ketiv be nefesh asher tiga bo v'tame'a ad ha'areb v'lo yochad min hakodashim ki im rachas besaro b'mayim. Okay, so regarding your question, I can have an easy answer for half of it. If a person themselves, they are tameh, can they eat maaser sheni, that is tahor, but they are tameh? That is an explicit pasuk in Vayikra that says any person that touches something and he becomes tameh, he cannot eat from kodashim. We're going to see on the next stuff that this applies to maaser sheni. Fine. So now, if a person is tameh, that's the warning that he cannot eat maaser sheni. But how about if the maaser sheni itself is tameh and the person is tahor? How do you know that? Here it is. Talmud Omar, lo tuchal le'echol bisharecha ma'asar deganecha. Pasuk in Devarim Yud Bet says, you cannot eat in your own cities maaser sheni. Rather, you have to bring it to Jerusalem. Good. Later on in Devarim it says regarding kodashim that become disqualified, so you have to redeem it, and then you can go and eat it in your city. So this is an opposite law. And when you eat it in your city, you can eat it, both a tameh person and a tahor person can sit together and eat it, and even though the tameh person is going to make it tameh, that's okay, because you can eat disqualified kodashim betum'ah. So now we have these two contrasting laws, and we're going to connect them. V'tana Rabbi Ishmael, afilu tameh v'tahor, ochlina shulchan echad bekara achat ve'enan choshishin. The second pasuk refers to a person who is tameh and a person who is tahor can eat on one table together, even from one dish, and they don't have to worry, even if they don't touch each other, but the tameh person will touch the food, and the food will become tameh. Nevertheless, the tahor person can eat the tameh food. Regarding kodashim, that are pasul. V'kama l'chamana hahu da'amri la chatam bisharecha tochelenu hacha lo techul. And the point here is to contrast that if you're eating it outside Jerusalem in your cities, then it's permitted for a tahor person to eat tameh food. So regarding Maaseh Sheni, where it says you cannot eat it in your city, but rather only in Jerusalem, that comes along with the opposite of eating it outside of Jerusalem. And so that means outside of Jerusalem, you can eat the tameh food. In Jerusalem, which is Maaseh Sheni, you cannot eat it when the food is tameh, even if you are tahor. So that's how we learn it from the contrast with that, with this other law. Okay, brilliant. Ma she'en ken bitruma. Now, all this is not true regarding teruma. Minalan. What are we analyzing? Remember, now we're not even just analyzing the Mishnah and Bikurim Bet. We're analyzing the other cases that are not mentioned in that Mishnah that it could have mentioned. And so they are regarding teruma that it can, if it becomes tameh, it can be burnt, and you can use benefit from that fire. Even though it's tameh. So the question is, minalan, how do we know this? Amar Rabbi Abhu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kera, Lo bi'arti mimenu betameh. Regarding Maaseh Sheni in the Vidui, it says, I did not destroy or burn the Maaseh Sheni while it was tameh. So that's not allowed. Now it says the extra word here, mimenu, from it. That is a limiting word. Mimenu iyatamavir. So I know that Maaseh Sheni, I'm not allowed to do that, but there must be something else that is permitted. So what is it limiting the prohibition to? So it means that the prohibition is limited to Maaseh Sheni, but Tirumah is permitted. Good, that makes sense, but we challenge it. How do you know that this limitation is limiting the prohibition to Maaseh Sheni to permit Tirumah? Maybe the word mimenu is limiting the prohibition so that you could permit kodesh, that something that was consecrated to be sacrificed and it became tameh, that you are allowed to burn and benefit from it. And so it's coming to permit kodesh nitma and not tiruma. So we answer no. Lav kavachomer hu. Kavachomer mama said hakal amra Torah lo bi'ati menu betameh kodesh chamur lo kol sheken. If regard Maaseh Sheni, which is more lenient, and the Torah says you cannot burn it and benefit from. So all kodesh, which is much more stringent, all the more so I cannot burn it and use it. Okay, that makes sense. But then we can use that same logic to break the original derivation that we used to permit tirumah, because after all, tirumah is also more stringent in general than Maaseh Sheni. So we should say, tirumah, if Maaseh Sheni you cannot burn, tirumah also you cannot burn. Okay, but the word mimenu has to exclude something from the prohibition, so it should be tirumah. So now we say umara'ita. How do you decide to exclude one over the other? How do we know that we should permit tirumah? Maybe the pasuk is permitting kodesh that became tameh. So we answer, mistabira kodesh lo mi ma'atena sheken pan ka'achas. Because kodesh can't be the one, because kodesh has a lot of stringencies. It has the following 6 stringencies that are noted by this mnemonic. Each one of these letters stands for something else. So kodesh that became tameh is kodesh in general has the following stringencies. Pigul, if the kohen who's offering it has bad intentions and he intends to eat it outside of the time, then it becomes disqualified. Notar, if it passes over the time limit, then it's no good anymore. It is a korban that you're actually offering, unlike other things like Maaseh Sheni that you're not actually offering it in the Bet HaMikdash. Me'ilah, if someone benefits from korban, they violate me'ilah, which is serious violation, karet. If someone eats it who's not allowed to, then they get karet, and also an onen cannot eat kodesh. So you see, this has 6 various stringencies, so it makes sense that we should not permit kodesh to be burnt, and instead we should allow teruma. That's the one that the permission is granted to, teruma. And now we argue the other way around. Adraba, teruma lo mematena. No, maybe teruma is the one that we should be stringent on, because after all, sheken machpaz. Teruma has the following 4 stringencies: mita vechomesh ve'en la pijon ve'asura lezarim. If someone benefits from teruma who's not allowed to on purpose, then they get mita bidei shamayim, which is less than karet. If they do it not on purpose, then they have to pay an extra fifth. And it does not have pijon. You cannot redeem it. If you want to move it, transfer it, you cannot redeem it, and non-kohanim cannot use it. Cannot benefit from teruma. So it has these 4 strings. So maybe teruma is the one that we should say you're not allowed to burn and benefit from the burning. No, hanach nefishin. The one for kodesh, that was 6 of them. There's only 4 of them. So therefore, we know from the pasuk and in Maaseh Sheni that mimenu, something applies to Maaseh Sheni, and we're gonna permit some other case. So the one other case we can permit is teruma, because in general that's less stringent than kodeshim. Another answer is that karet is better. It doesn't mean it's better, it means it's more severe. And so karet, which applies in kodesh, is more severe. That shows that kodesh has the more severe one. So that's the one that that's going to be prohibited. And so the one that we're going to permit from the pasuk of mimenu is going to be teruma. Because that is does not have karet, but only mita bidei shamayim, and so just based on that alone, besides the 6 and 4, just from the punishment alone, will tell us that this is the permission to burn teruma and benefit from teruma. All right, now just one last case to clarify, to bring a proof for ve'ochlan betumat atzman loke mashen ken bitruma, regarding maaseh sheni and bikurim. If someone eats those items while that food is tameh, even if the person is tahor, they get malkut. That does not apply to teruma. How do we know? Milkahu de la lakeha isuraika minelan. Okay, it's true, you don't get malkut for eating teruma when the teruma is tameh, but how do we know it's even prohibited at all? Amar kera bisharecha tochelenu. Regarding kodashim that become disqualified, that you can eat in your cities, hatameh v'hatahor, and the tameh person will make the food tameh, and the tahor person can eat it anyway. That applies only to kodashim that became disqualified. Lezeh velo lacher, but it excludes another case. Which other case? Teruma, which is also a holy food that is compared, but here it's excluded. Velo lacher. So therefore, teruma, even though it becomes tameh, nevertheless may not be eaten. So this is velav haba michalal aseh. This is formulated as naseh. Bisharecha tochelen. You can eat it there. We only infer that there is another type of holy food, teruma, that you cannot eat betumah. And so that has the force of an aseh, but if one violates an aseh, he does not get lashes. And so that's the source of that second law. That ends the long tangent we went on regarding the second Mishnah. But now we're going to go all the way back to that first Mishnah, where we asked that question of Rav Sheshet all the way in the beginning regarding Maaseh Sheni, can an Arel eat it? And Rav Sheshet said, the answer is no, because it's not included in Mishnah Aleph, which talks about Tiruman Bikurim, what they have in common. That's different from Maaseh Sheni. If Maaseh Sheni was permitted for an Arel, then it would have been included in that list. Since it doesn't include it, means that all 3, Teruma, Bikurim, and Maaseh Sheni, are all prohibited for an Arel to eat. Then we said, wait, maybe it's not a comprehensive list. We only brought a proof that it's not comprehensive from Mishnah Bet, not from Mishnah Aleph. So Rav Asher wants to go back now. Rav Asher, if forget the second Mishnah, I can, even from the first Mishnah itself, there are some things that are left out of that Mishnah that are true for Tiruman Bikurim and not for Maaser Sheni. And therefore, there's really no proof from Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet really has no proof from there, because it could have easily left out Adel too, since it left out some other things. So what are those items that are left out? Medela kataneh v'nohagim bish'ar sheneh shavua v'hen lahem pijon ma she'en ken b'ma'aser shema'minam. Teruma and bikurim apply during all the years of Shemitah. They don't take a break. You have to give Teruma and bikurim during all the years, which is not true of Maaser Sheni, which is only in the first, second, fourth, and fifth years. So that's one thing that Teruma and Bikurim have in common. That's not true for Maaser Sheni. And also redemption. You cannot redeem Teruma and Bikurim. You can redeem Maaser Sheni. If you have a lot and you live far away, you can't carry it. You redeem it for money, and you carry the money to Jerusalem, and you buy food in Jerusalem. So that's another thing. And those are not true regarding Maaser Shema Mina. So now we have conclusive proof that even Mishnah, not only Mishnah Bet, but even the Mishnah Aleph is not comprehensive. Since it's not comprehensive, Rav Sheshet cannot use it as a proof from the fact that it left out an Adel. And therefore, right now, we do not have an answer to the original question that we asked. Can an uncircumcised person need Maaser Sheni? We don't know, but we'll see a whole bunch of proofs on the next stuff. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen ve'amen.